Welcome everyone to the Community IT Innovators webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about nonprofit IT trends, and we have Johan Hammerstrom and Matthew Eshleman. Next slide. Just a few tips before we get started. We encourage you all to ask questions and post questions via chat, and also interact during the polls we'll be asking you all. If possible, avoid multitasking, and we often get asked if we're going to be sharing the recording and the PowerPoint afterwards, so we will be sending that to you by email. Just a little bit about Community IT Innovators. We provide we help nonprofits with their strategic and day-to-day IT challenges, and we invite you to check us out at communityit.com. I'm going to now hand it over to Matt and Johan so they can go into the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Roshni. It's a pleasure to be here for our final webinar of the year. So we will not be having a webinar in December, but we'll start the series up again in January. So we just want to thank everyone who attended and participated in our webinar series this year. It's something we've really enjoyed doing, and something that we really look forward to continuing in 2014. So we thought, given that it's the end of the year, that it would be fitting for us to sort of end the year with a look back and a look ahead. So what we're going to do today is take a look at some of the trends that Matt and I have noticed in 2013, some of the things that we've found really significant in the world of technology, and then also do our best to sort of gaze into the crystal ball and look forward to 2014 and see what's coming. It's much easier to look back when it comes to technology than it is to look forward. It's really hard to kind of predict where technology is going to go. But obviously, it's important to stay on top of the different trends that are happening. So we hope you find this session today interesting. It's going to be very conversational in nature, and we certainly encourage all of you who are attending to, basically, ask any questions that you have, and feel free to chat us or to us you at the end of the webinar. So, yeah. We're obviously getting out ahead of the, the end of December. So interactive, I'll be sharing some links throughout the webinar. So we've got to get off. Just get a quick poll audience today. Get the responses here. So leave this open for just a few more seconds. Thanks for the response. 1 to 20 organizational size with about 30% in the 20 to 50 kind of things. And organizational size is really one of the drivers I think of that we see in terms of the technology choices that organizations make. So I appreciate that. Talking about the short notice, we get a stack of wood, all familiar with. But we'll start off services, and then finally, we've got a grab bag, any input or links or things to share. Go ahead and just chat those in or use the conversation today. So, once again, we'll get this kicked off over the past 11 start, because fundamentally that's how we all interact with IT is through the types of doing this for a while. For a long time, organizations, executives, clunkier affairs, standard issue with the work, and obviously with everything that's happened over the last 5 years or so, especially with the iPhone, that's all really changed dramatically. So we're going to talk about a couple different devices today and sort of what's happening in the industry. I think a good place to start, no pun intended, is with the smartphone, which has really transformed the IT industry over the last 5 years, more than anything else. And I think, obviously the iPhone has been the catalyst of that transformation. And this was an interesting year for the iPhone. I think a lot of people have wondered what's going to happen to Apple in this post-Steve Jobs era. And I think the jury is still out on that a little bit. And I think one of the interesting things that's happening at Apple right now is that there's I think, been a lot of pressure on Apple to innovate. And I think Steve Jobs was really well-renowned for being an innovator and for really sparking a lot of innovation. And so I think a lot of people outside of Apple, a lot of pundits, tech pundits, are really asking, like, where's the innovation coming from with Apple?
But if you look at Apple's history, over the last 15 years, they don't come out with innovative products every year. They came out with the iMac way back in the 90s. They came out with the iPod in the early 2000s. They came out with, and then nothing really until the iPhone came out in 2007. So there have been long 4 or 5 year stretches in Apple's history where they're not necessarily innovating. And I think innovation actually doesn't really describe what Apple does best. I think Apple is much better as a refiner of technology. Steve Jobs was amazing at sort of picking his spots and then really kind of refining the technology. My audio shaky? Okay. I'm sorry, I just got the word that my audio is shaky. I'm going to do some adjustments here, and hopefully that helps. And please, we definitely, that feedback is critical. So if the audio is a problem, please let us know. Maybe I'm just shaking because I'm so excited, talking about Apple over here. At any rate, I think, so the knock on Apple this year is that they released an iPad that looks like the iPad mini. They didn't make any changes to the iPad mini. They released a couple iPhones that look like every other iPhone, they've released largely over the last 4 or 5 years. And I think people see that as a sign that Apple's losing its footing, and I actually see it kind of as the opposite. I feel like it's a sign of Apple doing what it does best in sort of the off-innovation years and really kind of focusing on refining its services.
Yeah, I mean, I think with that being said, I have a Windows laptop as my primary laptop. I have an iPhone as my primary phone. I have an iPad. And I would say, yeah, this year's, I guess, a casual Apple user was a bit underwhelming. I upgraded to iOS 7, which was a terrible user experience. I mean, performance-wise, performance and battery, I'm not any better off than I was before. Mm-hmm. And I think the focus, at least on iOS 7, which I view as a lot more kind of window dressing and from having a designer perspective, design it looks pretty, but I think from a functionality standpoint, I'm not, I don't feel like I've, had a vastly improved user experience. And so, mm-hmm. For me, as I'm looking forward to devices, and maybe this kind of talks, speaks into some other trends. I think for me, some of the trends are more on kind of device freedom. So, particularly if you're tied to your cell phone carrier, there's a lot more real options for switching. Mm-hmm. To a different carrier, the rise of the MVNOs. I mean, T-Mobile has been pretty successful in, really dropping the price and gaining a lot of subscribers. I was fortunate enough to take a trip this year. I went to Australia, and the overseas, cell phone market, it's amazing. I, unlocked my phone before I left, showed up in Australia, walked into a cell phone provider, got a SIM, paid $30, and I had voice, data, unlimited, text messaging, and I'm basically paying, 2 to 3 times that here in the U.S. So, yeah. I think, the device, being tied to the carriers may impact that trend further on in 2014.
Yeah, and I think another thing that's been interesting is the degree to which, so clearly, I think, most enterprises are now at a point where they're supporting iPhones, and to a lesser extent, Android phones. There are a few organizations that are still supporting BlackBerries, but those numbers are dwindling, and I think BlackBerry just released their new phone recently, and it was even less, whelming than the previous release. And I think, BlackBerry, having been acquired by a private equity firm, is pretty close to the end of its life as a company. And I think we'll see that in 2014. So what's interesting is that Apple has done very little to make the iPhone enterprise-friendly, and Android as well. And so I think if you're trying to manage these, at least phones, from within your organization, there's some third-party tools you can use, but in general, it's not, the devices themselves are not as friendly towards enterprise management as, the BlackBerry or even the Windows Phone, which doesn't seem to be gaining much steam. So it's interesting to see that gulf is not being, closed, and I think we could be looking at that just sort of being a permanent, state. Like you're just never going to get to a point where you have a good sort of enterprise-managed mobile ecosystem.
Yeah, and I think, I'll probably, jump on the bandwagon of putting a nail in BlackBerry's coffin. I mean, we support about 125 organizations, and, I think, we're kind of slowly getting rid of all of the legacy BlackBerries. I mean, just last week we shut down, probably one of, remaining 3 maybe BlackBerry enterprise servers. Everything has gone, to iPhone, Android, some Windows, mobile, and I think that's driven largely by end user preference, and I think to some extent some more BYOD policies where folks get to choose what devices that they're using, and most people are not choosing BlackBerries. And I would say, in large part in the nonprofit sector, some of the security concerns that would demand people carrying 2 devices or needing a really robust kind of enterprise management solution, that just isn't there, and so the freedom of device use is a lot more important than security and manageability.
Mm-hmm.
So people go for kind of ease of use and functionality over some of those security concerns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. Kind of extending up from the phones, the tablet space is one that I have found really fascinating, and I think we're still at a point where people, both individual users, are trying to figure out how useful can a tablet be and how much can a tablet replace, my normal computer, both at home and at work. And then I also think that the computer industry itself is still trying to figure out, what's the best approach to delivering a tablet experience. And so, I mean, I think there's greater variety in the world of tablets than in any other level or any other class of devices. And you don't need to look any further than the Windows tablets to kind of get a sense of this. And for those of us who are sort of really into gadgets, what's happened in Windows tablets this year has just been like kind of a combination of fascinating and amusing, because they fold in all kinds of different ways. They spin around. Like Dell has one that the screen, like there's a frame that's like a traditional laptop frame, but then the screen spins around. Lenovo made the Yoga, which is a tablet that actually doesn't, it has a hinge like a laptop, but it doesn't actually have a keyboard. It's just a stand. There's so many different things going on in the tablet space right now, and I think it reflects the fact that people don't know sort of what these devices, people know that they like them, but they don't know exactly what they're supposed to be doing with them. And you see like Microsoft's, Surface ads are generally like people, they're kind of like mullet devices. It's like, business in the front, party in the back. I mean, that really is like, that kind of, I think, sums up some of these tablets, and also the Surface Pro.
Yeah.
And you're trying to have your cake and eat it too. And I think thus far, the verdict has been it just doesn't work. Like, those devices they're too heavy to be an effective tablet. They're too underpowered to be an effective laptop, and you end up just kind of unsatisfied with both experiences. And I think in general, most people are still resigned to carrying a laptop for most of the work that they need to do, and carrying a tablet for either the party, the fun, the media consumption. The form factors are very, very different, and I think that they're more different than people really realize.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, though, that in some of the larger organizations that we interact with, I think we are seeing tablets kind of more and more as a laptop replacement. I think especially if there are executives, that just go to a lot of meetings or need to kind of read and have a lot of content available, but maybe not produce a
Mm-hmm.
lot of content.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think the tablet could be conceivably a laptop replacement. But I think overall, if you need to do real work, that keyboard and that kind of laptop experience, I think is going to continue to to hold through the coming years. And it will be interesting. I think the Surface Pro, Surface Pro 2, apart from the double position kickstand, which I think really has people run the store to get it. Microsoft, I think, recognized that Office is still their big driver. That is a big benefit of being able to use Outlook or to use full-featured Microsoft Word.
Mm-hmm.
I think it could be be a good could get some traction after a pretty slow start.
Yeah, I think so. Back to your point about executives being a great sort of group or use case for our iPads, I think that's very true. And I think in general, and actually I have a lot of the tech bloggers that I follow increasingly are just using iPads because, they're bloggers, so they spend a lot of time reading press releases and, industry reports, which is great on an iPad. And then they spend the rest of their time, writing up blog entries, and that's pretty easy to do on an iPad. And I'm going to throw some links in the chat here in just a minute. So one of the things I keep hearing about is the Logitech ultra-thin keyboard. And actually, one of the funnest things to do if you're an industry watcher is to just sort of tap into the hype machine 2 or 3 weeks before an Apple launch, because it just gets to a fever pitch, and all the fanboys go crazy. Oh, what if Apple? So all the rumors this year were just nuts. There was this big rumor about how there was going to be a 13-inch iPad. Everyone was convinced. Another rumor how Apple was going to have a keyboard style. I mean, Apple's just no, we don't do all those things. People always forget, this is what Apple does, and they do it really well. They've kind of pinned all of their hopes and dreams on all this crazy stuff that Apple's never going to do. So anyways, this keyboard has gotten great reviews, and generally what I've heard is that if you are basically just reading content, going to a lot of meetings and occasionally checking and working on your email, which a lot of executives do, the iPad is the best way to do that because it's light. It's much better than a laptop for reading. And with a cellular connection, it's always on everywhere. And so I think a lot of people who gravitated to the iPad sort of combine it with this keyboard case, and it basically becomes like a laptop replacement for them. And it's interesting to sort of contrast that approach where Apple's we're going to focus on making a really good tablet, and then, third-party manufacturers can make the keyboard that goes along with it. We're not going to try to, do it all in one. Mm-hmm. We're going to let people sort of figure out the best way to use this. And I think one other thing I'll say about the tablet on those lines is that we're starting to see the emergence of apps that, I think up until now, and you notice, this year Apple released its version of the Office suite, Pages and Presenter. They're now free on the iPad because I think they're trying to push this idea that the iPad is a productivity device, which is good. But I think what's also happening that's really interesting is that people are starting to release apps that they're not just sort of dumbed down, scaled down versions of laptop apps that are showing up on the tablet. They're actually tablet-only apps, and they're allowing people to start doing things that you can't do anywhere else, that you can only do on a tablet. And I think Paper is one that I hear about more than anything else as sort of a drawing and note-taking app that's really it's really advanced. It's very mature as an app that can only really work on a tablet. So I'll throw that link up here in just a second.
Yeah, and I think, kind of building off of that, I mean, kind of recognizing that tablets are kind of separate and unique, kind of devices, not just, a dumbed-down laptop. I think on the laptop front, I mean, I think the improvements, especially with the move to the cloud, which we'll, obviously get into a little bit later, it does seem like a lot of the improvements in kind of usability and, kind of feature refinements are more around, kind of battery life and, screens as opposed to, the next biggest and fastest processor because, quite frankly, people aren't, using the processor in the laptop as much as you're relying on
right.
the mobile workforce, traveling all over the place, and that battery life is a lot more important than if you're going to crunch 3D graphics on your laptop all day.
Right, and I think and that's a great point because I think what we're seeing in laptops is the move towards the MacBook Air is kind of the sort of the darling laptop of 2013, and with the Haswell processor, the 13-inch gets 11 hours of battery life, the 11-inch gets 9 hours of battery life. But you can't use those for intensive graphics, So to your point, Matt, you basically spec down the laptop to the point where it's sort of like a fancy tablet, and the tablet sort of specced up. But there does still seem to be this chasm between the form factors that's hard to bridge.
Yeah. I mean, so I think, we've definitely spent a lot of time talking about devices, and I do want to talk about some other things as part of our discussion here today. So if there's any final, final device thoughts. I mean, we haven't talked about Android at all. I'm not sure.
I don't think there's much to say about Android. I mean, I personally really like Android, but, and I think Android has done there's a lot to say about Android. I won't really get into it. I think Android has absolutely met Google's objectives, which were to make sure that it had a strong hold in mobile data so that they could continue their massive data collection work, which is their fundamental business. I think it leads to all kinds of interesting issues in the Android space because they're not really focused on devices per se. But that's probably a whole other webinar. The one thing that on the device front, I think there's something really interesting happening right now with operating systems that I think is worth just mentioning. And you've highlighted it here in this middle. We've sort of been talking around this elephant on the slide. Microsoft, released Windows 8 last year in 2012. And, they radically changed the user interface from Windows 7. And to the extent that most IT managers just did not want to roll it out because they were worried about sort of the end-user support challenges they were going to face. And that trend has continued into 2013. So the Windows 8, the number of Windows 8 installations is something like less than 10%. I mean, I think XP might still have a wider distribution right now than Windows 8. I'll have to find the numbers on that. But it just has not been adopted. And so Microsoft this year rolled out Windows 8.1. And they said, look, we heard you. We made a mistake. Actually, they didn't say that, but they said, we're making some changes. We're bringing back the start menu. But all they did was add an icon in the corner that when you click on it, takes you to the tile screen that is kind of confusing and frustrating and different. I think once people learn how to use it, they're kind of okay with it, but they're like, okay, I figured out how I need to do what I do, but it still requires 3 more clicks or 5 more mouse movements than it did in Windows 7. So it's definitely a less efficient operating system in some ways. So I think what I've seen happen is that a lot of people are like, if this is the direction Microsoft's going in, maybe I should give OS 10 a closer look. If I'm going to have to learn a new operating system, which is basically what Windows 8 is, maybe I should give this whole, and I love my iPad. People are used to sort of the visual language of iOS, and it's not a long ride from that, visual and user experience to the one provided by OS 10. So I've started to see a number of organizations sort of slowly or even quickly moving away from Windows altogether and moving at the device level and moving towards OS 10 as a desktop operating system.
Yeah, and I would say, that's certainly something that's relevant. Even within our own organization, our leadership group of 8 staff, I think most everybody has a Mac except for me with my with my PC that I've stuck an Apple sticker on so I can still fit in. But and I think part of the reason that trend I think has continued is because Microsoft and a lot of the software as a service vendors have made it very the end user experience is very similar no matter if you're on a Windows computer or a Mac or I guess even an Android. And so I think that maturation in the software as a service space I think lends itself to that device freedom. So you're not necessarily tied to a specific device to access your applications in a way that you expect them to work. You're getting that experience no matter what device you're on. So
yeah.
Great. So we've got actually somebody bailed us out with the adoption rate. I'm not sure. So according to the stats from Jeff, thanks for putting this in. Windows XP still has a 31% market share. Windows 7 46, and Windows 8 is at 8%. So it's not. Yeah, it's not looking good for Microsoft on the OS front. I think on the one hand, it's admirable to have one OS to rule them all, but I think at the same time, you definitely see the shortcomings in trying to, have one operating system to run your phone, your tablet, and your desktop.
Well, and I mean, I keep reminding myself that. So what was the number again on XP?
31%.
31%. That's going to be a 13-year-old operating system next year. So.
Yeah, I mean, and it's out of support. So.
Yeah, but people are still preferring it, and so that says a lot. And what it also implies or suggests is that 6 or 7 years from now, we could still be seeing a lot of Windows 7 out there. And back to your point, Matt, I mean, if the desktop is kind of this utilitarian device that you use to run your accounting system and do work on spreadsheets, why not run it on Windows 7? It still gets the job done. Anyways, devices.
Yeah, maybe we should have had this poll before we started, but would love to see what kind of device that folks are using out here in the audience. So if you could go ahead and just click your response. We'll see. We had a couple early Surface respondees, so we'll see how that holds up as the poll commences. So, yeah, so I think, go ahead and I'll leave it open for a few more seconds. Get the responses in here. So it looks like, I'll put the responses up. So most folks are using the iPad with, quite frankly, a surprising number of folks using the Surface or the Windows tablet. So, if you Surface or tablet users want to chat in or make a comment as to why it works for you, if that's something that was a personal choice that you made, or if it was a device that was provided by your organization, that'd be great to know.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Great. All right. So go ahead and I guess as a follow-up poll on the OS or the device question, we'll go ahead and ask if you have switched. So it looks like there's quite a few iPad users. We didn't ask if there's any on the laptop front, but if you have switched from Windows to Mac, what drove that decision? So was it a decision around the brand and image, the build quality, the operating system, just spite, or if there's
something on there? Just angry about Windows 8, and you were like, and I think Microsoft kind of has always had this unfortunate, and I think somewhat ill-deserved reputation of being the big evil computer corporation. And I think now that they're running scared a little bit, I think there's sort of a feeling of, now that we're out from under their thumb, people maybe want to wave it in their face a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's. So we'll see so most folks here, if they did switch, the reason was for build quality, and I think that probably echoes some of our our kind of observations and feelings internally, is that it's just a very good device. I'll go ahead and chat out a link for a laptop buying guide, a recommendation guide that I put together earlier in the year. Yeah, I mean, it basically made that point, is that with laptops are a very personal decision. That you spend a lot more time with them, and so a MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, I think is a great it is a great business device, and I think apart from maybe some of the benefits of the the operating system, I mean, it's arguably the best Windows laptop out there with some of the dual boot capabilities that it can provide. So.
Yeah, and actually, let me just quickly comment on that. In case you weren't aware, according to Microsoft, their Windows 7 licensing allows for you to install Windows 7 on any machine running a valid operating system. So traditionally, if you have a Vista machine, the Windows 7 upgrade license covers your upgrade from Vista to 7. It turns out that Microsoft also considers OS X to be a valid operating system. So if you purchase a MacBook Air and you want to run Windows on it because you like the build quality, or you have an office where you've got people who want to use different operating systems and you just want to standardize on one hardware, you can get really affordable Windows 7 and Windows 8 upgrade licenses from TechSoup if you're a nonprofit, and using a built-in utility called Boot Camp that comes with OS X, you can install Windows legally at a very low cost on those machines. And in our experience, it works just as well, in some cases better, as a Lenovo, Dell, or Fujitsu laptop. So, quick side there.
Cool. Great. Well, let's move on up the stack. We spent a lot of time talking about devices, but now I think we can start talking about some of the application trends that we've seen over over the last 11, 12 months and kind of where things are going. I would say kind of the breakout star that that we've seen, and for us has certainly been Office 365. Microsoft made Office 365 free for nonprofits, and that would be the E1 platform, which is basically Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, Link. They've also made E3 available for $5 a month, which is all the same things plus licensing for the Microsoft Office suite, plus the web app, and some extra whiz-bang things on Exchange in terms of document retention and legal search and some other things. But we've in the past we've done maybe 50-50 Google Apps Office 365 migrations in 2012, but certainly this year it's been 90% Office 365 migrations, and I think the maturity of the platform, people's familiarity certainly drives a lot of that.
Yeah.
And there's it's not been without bumps along the way, but it seems like they've gotten it sorted out, and it's been a very stable, very reliable platform. And so for us, where we may have a client that has 3 or 4 servers in their office to run mail and files and database, we're doing a lot of migrations where that's all going out to the cloud, and they just have one server in the office to share some large files, do some print sharing, domain authentication, and really shrinking down that footprint of the server room so that most of the technology it's out in the cloud.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see Microsoft make this pivot sort of away from operating systems and hardware. And I'm going to post an article from one of my favorite blogs, Read Write. And the article notes that in the third quarter of 2013, the Windows revenue generated by sales to PC makers fell 7%. But in the same time, the cloud-based revenues increased 100%. And this really kind of reflects the pivot that Microsoft's making, sort of away from devices, away from its traditional sources of revenue, and moving into the cloud. And I think, as Matt said, our experience has been that they've done it pretty successfully. I mean, I think we've been, like you said, it hasn't been without its hiccups, but for Microsoft to make that switch, has been pretty impressive. And I think one of the interesting things is sort of seeing the contrast between Google Apps and Office 365. And one of the things that I feel like I've observed in looking at those two systems is that Microsoft really gets the enterprise. And they may not always, they may stumble in various ways on sort of their understanding of tech trends or where the industry is going. But in terms of understanding how the enterprise really needs to use technology, I think Microsoft, understands that in a really deep way, having sold software to businesses for, the last 30 years. In a way that I don't feel like Google completely gets. Google's core business strategy is all about data collection. And I think sometimes when you're using Google Apps, you sort of feel like, I'm just entering data for Google to collect, and it's not necessarily providing you with the tools you need to accomplish tasks in a business environment. And you very much get that sense in Office 365. So I agree. I mean, Google Apps was ready to go 3 or 4 years ago. It was free at the time. It was pretty. It was a compelling choice, more compelling choice back then. But as Microsoft has made it free to nonprofits and really sort of matured the cloud-based system, I feel like it's definitely pulling ahead. I think you can go with Office 365 and be confident that it's going to meet your enterprise needs. And I don't think you can say that about Google Apps. There are definitely some cases where Google Apps is not a bad choice for an organization. but I think you need to vet that decision a little bit more than you do at this point with Office 365.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that all makes sense. I mean, Google Apps it's definitely, I think, if you're in that mindset, I think it could be a very powerful solution. I think it does, certainly I think have the benefit of being kind of coming out of a web, kind of a web platform viewpoint. Kind of fundamentally, Google's kind of the pure, it's the pure cloud solution. You're not necessarily working, through some of the kind of legacy on-premise issues that I think Microsoft Office still, kind of runs across. So if maybe you're an organization that has a lot of folks, internationally or low bandwidth situations, I think the Google Apps platform is still, a lot less, it's a lot lighter weight. And I think it can do most of the things that that most organizations need to run their business.
Yeah, I mean, I think Google Apps. I think part of the problem with Google Apps really is they've tried too hard to mimic what Office does and not come anywhere near it. And I think some of the solutions that are a little more interesting have been really interesting to me over the last year. Have been those solutions that just aren't. They're not trying to do what Office does, but they're trying to solve problems that people have in sort of new and innovative ways. So we've listed here, a handful of those solutions that we've been really interested in. Wunderlist is one that I still don't know. Like, I use Wunderlist in my personal life, and it was kind of, for many years, I wanted like a task list, a checklist that would sync with my phone, my computer. No matter where I went, it was synchronized. And I tried a bunch of different stuff, and nothing ever really fit the bill. And when I started using Wunderlist, it's like, oh, this is what I was looking for, the whole time. It's by no means perfect, but like my wife and I have a grocery list, in Wunderlist that we share. We each have like Wunderlist accounts, and I keep track of my work to-dos, home to-dos. So, it's an interesting task list, a solution that really sort of is built for the environment that consists of cloud, mobile devices, and desktops. It's not trying to adapt an earlier, piece of software to that environment. It was kind of built with that in mind. So whether it's a good solution for the enterprise or not, they have a pro version that you can subscribe to. I haven't really tested that yet, and my sense is that it doesn't have sort of the complexity that you would need to do sort of project management tasks with. But there are other tools that offer that.
Yeah, and before we do hop to some of the project management tools, there was a question that came in, or a comment from Jonah that said, most Office 365 deployments have been very challenging with a very limited feature set for working with complex documents. Most people end up not being able to work in the cloud anyway. And this may be something where, Office 365 is kind of the big bucket for what are, very different products. So, for us, our clients, I think most, Office 365, first and foremost is Exchange Online, and that's been, very seamless. End users don't necessarily, have much of an inclination of, is there email in the server down the hall? Is it in Microsoft's cloud? So the email migration piece is very easy, straightforward. I think not a lot of issues there. The sleeper hit of Office 365 has been Link. It's basically, business Skype, or where you can do chat, you can do voice, you can do screen sharing. It's been a great. We use it. Our email's still in our office, but we have Office 365, and we use the Link service, quite extensively. SharePoint would be, Microsoft's collaboration piece, and I think, the big weakness and maybe the trend for 2014 is there's still not the perfect solution for file, kind of cloud-based file sharing. And so I think Microsoft has made improvements with SkyDrive Pro, and I think we're looking at that pretty closely as a replacement for for the traditional file server, but it's still the shift from what might has been a very stable and reliable open up your network drive, you browse to your folder, you open up a file, it locks it right away. You can do you edit it, you track changes, all that to kind of replicate that in the cloud requires, I think, a degree of complexity that a lot of organizations or a lot of companies are trying to solve, but nobody's kind of got the magic bullet just yet.
Yeah, but I appreciate Jonah making that point, because it's true that the Office web apps, which is the web in browser embedded Office suite, is not that great. I haven't used it in about a year, but the last time I used it, it was kind of unusable. So you're still kind of stuck with, with the files remain, as Matt said, like a real challenge. And without getting off on that tangent, my personal feeling, having observed that problem and the various attempts to solve it over the last 2 years, is that nothing is ever really going to replace the Microsoft file server in the cloud. I think if something could, it would have been built by now. And I think instead we're going to kind of have to accept that we're going to be using our files in a different way than we're used to, in a way that's combines sort of local synchronization with web-based collaboration. I could be wrong. Something else may pop up, and again, like these are the kinds of things you say, and you always get like your words get thrown back at you a year later when the problem has been solved. But I know that this is a problem that at least a dozen or more companies have been actively trying to solve for at least 5 years, and it's showing no signs of being any closer to fixing it.
Yeah, I went ahead and just chatted out a link to another blog post that one of our partners from Ignite, that's a cloud-based file sharing solution that we've used pretty extensively, because it's kind of the best the best option of what's out there for meeting this requirement of moving your files to the cloud, and then how do you surmount those hurdles of very large file types, collaborating with people outside your organization, fast local access, but access to files when you're outside of your office. I think we've done a pretty good job in all those aspects, and it's just very there's a lot of other organizations or a lot of companies trying to solve this problem, and I think maybe that'll get solved in 2014.
I hope I'm proven wrong. I think Ignite is something that we have been recommending. I think the one big advantage of Ignite is that it's a stepping stone to storing your files in the cloud. They managed to combine sort of a cloud-based file sharing and synchronization service like Box or Dropbox with a local file sharing device, a network-attached storage device, and it works reasonably well, but it's not seamless. In fact, it's far from seamless. And we just finished a pilot study of Ignite with a 100-person nonprofit that has offices all in 6 different cities around the country. And our conclusion was that basically we're going to segment out the different use cases within the organization, so that those staff and volunteers who are local will just use the local, and those staff and volunteers that are traveling a lot and have laptops will use the cloud-based, sort of more Dropbox-like functionality. It'll all be under a single umbrella, so that's an advantage. But it's impossible for someone with a laptop to go into the office and get on the file server and get it. That's not seamless. And I know that they've been trying to solve that problem for a long time. So it's a good solution in some cases. It's pretty good technology, but there are other cases where you might be better off just going straight to the cloud.
Yeah. So moving on, I think from the Office 365 Google Apps, we can talk a little bit, I think, about some of these, purpose-built applications that are solving problems that I think some of the big legacy software providers are missing. So the 2 hot ones that I like are in the project management space. They both, so Smartsheet and Trello, they come at it from different angles. So for those of you that are agile project managers, Trello is probably right up your alley. It's basically a Kanban board, where you can easily have columns and move tasks around. So I learned about it at the NTEN conference this past year, and we've adopted it internally. It's been a very effective tool for running meetings. The user adoption is very quick. It's intuitive. It's easy to use. It works. There's an iPad app. There's an Android app. Kind of checks off all the boxes of intuitive software that's like, it's not trying to do too much, and it just works.
Yeah, it's really well designed, really well built. it's a great example of like what software is going to have to look like moving forward in order for it to be successful.
Yeah, and so in that same vein of kind of project management, Smartsheet is another one that's for more of your your traditional waterfall project management methodology. Maybe recovering Microsoft project users. It's basically Excel spreadsheet on steroids. It is cloud, it's based in the cloud, and again, like Trello, very very easy to use, very kind of low barrier to entry. Half hour you can basically learn the system and put it to good use.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't kind of one project management system that's going to give you detailed reporting and kind of roll up progress reports on all 200 initiatives that you have across your organization. But it is going to be a system that people are actually going to use. It's not going to require a dedicated project manager to sit on and babysit and get people to adhere to. And I think for most organizations, that's what you need. Microsoft Project is just too much. Your Microsoft, your task list and Outlook is not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And these solutions like Smartsheet and Trello, really provide a nice feature set, for folks to use. So I'll go ahead and chat those links out.
Yeah.
And encourage you to take a look. They're both free. I think they both have premium business offerings that give you some maybe integration with Google Apps or some other things. But they're good tools to check out.
Yeah, and I think for the IT managers out there in the audience, I think part of our task as folks responsible for delivering IT services is really kind of understanding the requirements, the work requirements that that people have, and then understanding which applications are going to best meet those work requirements. Because you don't want to overdo it with features. Because if you give someone a Microsoft project to do something that they could accomplish with Trello, they're going to fail. They're not going to. But at the same time, if you're building an apartment building and you're the construction manager, Trello is not going to get the job done for you. You're not going to design a Boeing 747. It's such an old plane. I'm totally dating myself there. You're not going to design
87.
Yeah, there you go. The Airbus 830. You're not going to design that with SketchUp online. You need AutoCAD. But I think it's important to realize that to understand sort of the complexity of the task at hand, the sophistication and training of the person doing the task, and then identifying the right tool for them to get the job done. And I think that increasingly that's going to be a responsibility that IT departments have moving forward. And I just want to kind of give a shout out to Peter Campbell. He's not on the call today, but the CIO at Legal Services Corporation, as someone who for a long time I think has done a fantastic job of really being able to do that, as a CIO, figure out what the requirements of the organization are, and then find the right tool to get the job done. So there are a ton of tools out there, and I think maybe that's kind of the take-home lesson from this slide. And in some ways, the best thing to do is just experiment with them a little bit, or get with a group of people who've used them before and know how they work.
Yeah, good. Let's move on. Let's take a quick poll. We talked a lot about Office 365 already. Love to see what folks are using or folks are using. I guess this isn't a multiple choice selection. So go ahead and respond in if you're using Office 365, Google Apps. If you want to give your vote to FileSync, love to see that.
Yeah, unfortunately, when we put the poll together, we thought it was multiple choice. It's a radio button, so don't get frustrated if you start clicking on. Maybe pick the one that you like the best.
All right. Well, with folks in here, it looks like most folks actually prefer to use the Google Apps platform with Office 365 close behind. I would say that's it's a little bit heavier on the Google Apps side than I think some of the organizations that we see.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess not surprising at all. So I think and then Amazon is on here one of the things, I think that Amazon, I think the cloud for nonprofits specifically, a lot of the kind of big advantages of cloud, when you talk about scalability and flexibility and kind of shifting costs, the benefits of Amazon, I think a lot of us, we're just not big enough to realize, that, those benefits. Netflix runs on Amazon. Like that's the scale. I was just read an article about, there's a cloud consulting company that basically builds supercomputers using EC2, and so they, ran a 120 petaflop, supercomputer to do statistical, or to do like analysis of some bacteria for a university, and they ran it for 33 hours. It cost them $38,000, but they basically computed what was going to take 2.5 million hours of compute time. They did it in a couple of just a couple of days. So so I think for us, we've certainly been taking a cloud first approach. I think that's manifested itself a lot more on the software as a service side, as opposed to kind of using infrastructure as a service in the cloud, building your own servers in the cloud, because unless you're quite large, you have very specific needs. It doesn't make sense for an organization to build their own Exchange server in the cloud when you can do that with Office 365.
Yeah, although I do think, I have run into a couple situations where, and I think the place where you see this the most is with sort of older proprietary software packages. So IMIS is one. It's association management system that was huge in the early 2000s, and it's still a big player in association management space, but has also been supplanted by some cloud-based services. But there are organizations who, they're completely hooked into IMIS, and it just doesn't make sense for them to move on to some other system. But continuing to have 3 or 4 servers in their server room to run IMIS on is starting to look, like the availability of that system is in question. If there's PCI compliance issues, that can be challenging to deal with on a hardware level. And so Amazon is a potential way of, if there are certain segments of your organization, certain parts of your information system architecture that you would like to move out to the cloud, but you also still need to be able to run on a server, Amazon is a potential solution. And not just a potential, but I'm going to post another little article here. In the third quarter of this year, Amazon basically did $1 billion worth of net sales with Amazon Web Services. That's up from $600 million a year ago. And Amazon is by far sort of the undisputed leader in this area, and it's so far ahead of the competition that it's things. You could have said that about BlackBerry 7 years ago. So things have a way of changing really quickly in the tech sector. But Amazon Web Services, for those of you who aren't aware of it, is kind of one of the huge. Amazon always flies under the radar. Facebook gets more press than Amazon, and I think from a tech perspective, Amazon is doing things that are far more, having a much greater impact, on our world.
Yeah, I would say, the Amazon I think is a fantastic platform. It's, the features and the capacity that they can provide, it really is unparalleled. Because of all that complexity and sophistication, I think if you are thinking about building your own environment, you really need to know what you're getting into, because even just the pricing on Amazon, can drive you crazy. I mean, you get into, it is a commodity service. You can buy for, pay for servers per hour. You can buy a year contract. You can buy a year contract that says you're going to use it 50% of the time, or 70% of the time, or 100% of the time. And so, if you just need one server to do one job forever, it may not be the best fit. But it's, we use Amazon for a portion of our internal systems, and we really, benefit from the scalability and the flexibility that it provides. Yeah. So, it's a good solution. I would say unless you have a very specific use case, there's often a software as a service option that's going to be able to meet your needs better than, than building your own.
Yeah.
Cool. So we just have a few minutes left. Do you want to, get to, our grab bag of, other topics out there? I think in 2014, identity management, particularly with the proliferation of a lot of these cloud services, they're great, they're wonderful. You put your your email address, you make a password, and you log in. But data sprawl, I think, becomes an issue. Managing all these different cloud services becomes an issue. So I like Okta is a pretty slick solution that allows you to kind of integrate and manage your accounts from one place. So the old way where you could log into your network and have access to everything. Okta does that as a way to kind of integrate all of your account logins across Office 365 and Salesforce and Ignite, Google Apps. It can really it can be that central authentication point. So I think user identity management is going to be a big kind of a big trend, or it's a big technical challenge that organizations I don't think have realized kind of in what the degree to which they need to address it.
I think what I want to do at this point is just kind of run through some of in the questions section. Some of you out there in the audience have suggested some of the things that you've been looking at. So I just kind of want to run through those, and we'll try to compile that list later too and get that out. And because there's some really interesting technologies out here that are being suggested, I want to make sure we give a little bit of time to that. So big thanks to Jeff for listing up SocialCast from VMware, which I haven't heard of actually. He says it's like Facebook for organizations and free up to 50 users. So I'm going to take a look at that. Podio by Citrix is a free-form project in task management. I am actually familiar with that, and that's sort of a potential alternative to, it's more of an open platform than, say, Smartsheet, or Jira, or Asana. Katie's looking at Box. I'm looking at Box also. I'm very intrigued by Box. I've been really interested in Box as a concept for a long time, and I'm finally getting around to actually using it and testing it out in an enterprise setting. So I'm hoping to have a better understanding of Box, early in next year. Samir kind of highlighted your point, Matt, that Amazon Web Services EC2 probably not the best value for money with regards to performance. Beyond a point, you're better off building your own cloud. Absolutely, definitely agree with that. As Matt mentioned, there's some interesting and good use cases for AWS, but it's by no means it's not what everybody's going to be doing in 5 years. It's what a few people are going to be doing for some very specific tasks, over the next 4 or 5 years. Felicia asked how we would rate DNN as a CMS for a complex website, and I'm not familiar with
It's .NET Nuke.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I mean, WordPress seems to get all the thunder in the nonprofit space. We have a couple clients I think they're using .NET Nuke. I mean, it seems fine, and there's a number of good .NET Nuke hosts out there, Power DNN, and there's some others.
Katie mentioned LastPass as a password tracking system. That's an excellent one. We use one here because we manage security for a number of clients. We use a more complex one, but for a single organization, LastPass is great. Okta. Oh, so a couple questions about Okta. It's OKTA. OKTA.
It's a measure of cloud cover. It's actually not a made-up word. No, Okta. It's a real thing.
No kidding. So, that's very clever.
It's 8 octaves of cloud cover out there. If you were curious.
Interesting. So. Okay. Cool. And let's see. How much adoption are we seeing of Salesforce in nonprofits? Not as much as Benioff would like. That's probably the short answer. I mean, I think my take on Salesforce is that it's a good solution. I mean, this is starting to sound like a broken record. It's a good solution in some cases. You kind of there are definitely some cases in which it's a very good solution, and it's an incredibly flexible platform. You can do a lot of customization in Salesforce, which is that's kind of the dark side. I mean, in kind of looking broadly at all of these software solutions. You're balancing out like the flexibility versus the feature richness versus the complexity of use versus the overhead of customization. Because having to do too much customization, it can sink an IT system pretty quickly. And so you've got to be really careful. And I think that's probably been the thing that's maybe made, again, like Salesforce is more of a platform almost that you have to develop on than an out-of-the-box solution that's sort of ready to use right away. And so it can be a very powerful platform. There are definitely a lot of places in which it's a really good system to use. But, let's see, a recommendation on asset management software. That's a great question. I don't know. We have a sort of a monitoring system that we use to manage the assets of the organizations that we work with. I will say that if you have all Macs, we're just about to start testing a solution called Casper by JamF Software that looked really, really slick for, tweet that out, chat that out. That looks really, really slick for managing an all Mac environment. You can do all kinds of management stuff as well as asset management. Katie says she loves Sam Manage for asset management. I'll chat that out as well. And I know we're going over on time here. So I think that's going to have to be it. We thank you all for joining us today. This is a great discussion. Definitely want to thank all of you who made suggestions about technology solutions you're using. Want to thank you who asked great questions. Thank you all for your attention. Matt and I are going to have a blog post around this topic, and so if you want to continue the conversation on our website, communityit.com, or through Twitter. Let me put my handle right here.
You can join us then in January. We'll be delving into this file sharing for nonprofits, which it really is the last frontier for moving your organization out to the cloud. So as Johan mentioned, he's looking at Box. We've done a fair amount of work with Ignite. Starting to work with SharePoint. There's just a lot of different solutions in this segment. So we'll be talking in more depth in January, so please put that on your calendar. And again, connect with us, follow us on Twitter. There'll be a feedback after the webinar. We definitely appreciate your response. Audio quality issues, content.
We've been trying to do better on the audio quality, but if it's not there yet, please tell us that, and we'll continue to improve it. The webinar series means a lot to us, and we want to continue to improve the quality of it, both technically as well as content-wise. So if you have topics you'd like us to cover next year, if you're interested in being a guest presenter, we welcome that. So we thank you very much for your time today. Everyone have a great, safe, and happy rest of 2013. Have a happy New Year. And I know, it's still a little ways away. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Got to get to Thanksgiving
That's
first.
right. Okay. Well, have a great Thanksgiving, everyone, and we'll see you all in 2014.
All right.